I'm Dr. Deborah Watson, Advisory Services Team Manager from Innovate UK EDGE. This series, Innovate 2021, looks at enabling ambitious, innovative SMEs to overcome challenges and build for growth. So far, we've covered funding and finance, internationalisation, and we've met the Innovate UK EDGE family. Still to come in the series, we have leadership and how to bring out the best in yourself and your organisation, and turning your vision into reality, bringing innovative ideas to market. Each event promotes the broader bespoke support available from Innovate UK EDGE and how we can add value to your future growth plans in this challenging environment. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to ask a question, please do ask that in the Q&A. That will be moderated and we'll ask those of Andy at the end. Please raise your hand if you need any assistance. And please feel free to chat with other participants in the chat function, but that will be unmoderated. For on-demand purposes, this webinar is being recorded. Your personal video and microphones will not be used unless you're invited to speak by the host. Now, today we are pleased to welcome Andrew Phillips, who will share how working lean can build your long-term success. Andrew is an innovation specialist with over 25 years experience in helping businesses of all sizes to increase their capacity and solve problems. For Innovate UK EDGE, he's implemented lean projects in manufacturing, office and finance processes. And as a participant in Innovate 2021, subject to Innovate UK's eligibility criteria, there is also opportunity for you to access our comprehensive range of funded support. I'll give you details of how we may be able to help support you after we've heard from Andrew. So, good morning, Andrew, and over to you.
Hello, good morning. Thank you. And welcome everyone who's joined us. I will just start my slide deck and take you through it. Okay, good morning. Hello, I'm Andrew Phillips. I'm going to be taking you through a variety of topics in the sort of background of lean. So we're going to cover the origins of lean. Where does it come from? What is lean? What are the frameworks? What are the models that sit behind it? What's applicable? And then getting into some of the tools and techniques and understanding actually how do they apply? Well, what are their origins? How do they apply to wider business? How can we use them? How are they relevant to us in the real world? Coming back to how they can be applied in your workplace. What kind of measurements are important to make it work within business, and then bringing it all together, and hopefully you'll have some good questions at the end. Now, before we get into that, it will be useful for me to establish what your current level of lean knowledge is. So we're going to do a quick poll. So you should be able to vote now if you've got a smartphone to hand. And have you got no idea, never heard of lean? Heard of it, kind of know a bit about it, don't use it, are maybe using some of the elements of lean or actually been using it for years and here to just sort of polish up the knowledge. So if you'd like to vote now, and we'll give you a few seconds. That was a fairly quick result. So we've got a balance between those that actually haven't heard of it, some knowledge, and know some of the elements. That's okay. That's just so I know where to pitch it for you this morning. Right. So we're going to start with actually what is lean now. Last time I gave a training session, this will be a good question to start with, just to sort of work out where people are at. And the kind of question, or sort of the kind of answers I get are, well, it's about just in time, isn't it? You know, things arrive. Well, that's one of the tools, but it's not the starting point. Another common answer is, well, based on a bit of common sense. Again, kind of true, or to go for the full-on nuts and bolts of the management philosophy based on Toyota, but it's only for manufacturing. Well, yes, it is based on Toyota, but it's absolutely not just for manufacturing. It's about delivering what the customer wants, what they value, what the customer really values, about what you do, your product, your service. It's about doing that as efficiently as possible. The important thing, and this is what differentiates lean from other approaches, is it's not a project. It's not read the book and implement it. It's an approach. It's a way of thinking about things and a philosophy of doing things, but continually trying to be better. Whatever level you're at, striving for continual improvement. So lean is absolutely not a one-off project. In terms of places or organisations that have absolutely applied this philosophy of continual improvement that you will have heard of. Olympics 2012, Team Sky, British Cycling, they developed this approach, this way of thinking, and they called it, or coined the phrase, compound marginal gains, being obsessively compulsive about trying to make everything better, whether it was the aerodynamics of the wheel nuts, or the shape, the ergonomics, as within the rules, as much as was practically possible. Another one is UK rowing. I was lucky enough to go to a talk by one of the gold medalists a few years ago, and between them they had the sort of a way of thinking about pretty much everything of, will it make the boat go faster? And I think it was Beijing. Their particular event was very early in the schedule, and they had the choice: do we go to the opening ceremony? Their initial thought, well, of course you go to the opening ceremony. Then hang on, we're going to be on our feet for 6 hours. We race in 2 days. Will it make the boat go faster? No, it won't. The decision was, stay in the hotel, put your feet up, relax, watch it on the telly, but they got the gold. So, yeah, can influence how you think about things. Now, in terms of lean and lean business and the actual origins of lean, this goes back to post-war. So we had Ford, we had the Model T, limited options, mass production. Ford went for the economies of scale. So efficiency, just by doing it on a grand scale. Now, importantly, the important thing to recognise there, it works if the math works. Now, let's move forward to the 80s. So 70s, 80s, we would have had one factory making the Ford Granada, one factory making the Ford Capri. Now, if everyone wants a Capri and no one wants a Granada, now the maths don't work. On the other side, we've got Toyota. Their marketplace was very different, very diverse marketplace. They had limited money to invest in capital. They developed an approach, flexible operations, quick changeover between what they did. And they developed this way of thinking about things in terms of preserve the value and eliminate the waste. And we'll come back to that in terms of how you can, what does that actually mean? How can you apply it to your business, to your sector? Now, lean, this Toyota approach has now been adapted and boiled down into something suitable that can be applied in literally all sectors, from finance to retail to healthcare. Personally applied lean in mental health referral systems. Another project was universities of the Southwest, and even there's a national project across the NHS implementing lean within GP practices. So it is absolutely everywhere. Now, if we start with the origins of lean and the lean temple. Now, a lot of people say, right, we're going to do lean, we're going to do some continual improvement, we're going to go just in time next week. Now, what this temple is trying to represent is actually continual improvement, or Kaizen, is that's in the roof. That is absolutely the icing on the cake. And the point being, if you don't have the foundations in place, if you haven't done some of the basics and the organization is actually ready to sustain the improvements that you try to put in place, the roof falls down. There's nothing to support it. So I've been to many companies, worked with many organizations who would say, actually, we tried lean. Yeah, we tried just in time. Didn't work. When you actually peel back what happened, they went straight for the roof. They went straight for the icing on the cake. It's important to start with the foundations and get the basics in place. Start with the basics, build the pillars, and you will succeed. Different way of looking at things and a slightly different model. Now, this is from Clayton Christensen. He developed this, or the late Clayton Christensen. He developed this at Harvard, and this is a business model that can be applied to absolutely any business in any sector. So we've got 4 boxes. So within your business, you've got resources. They are your people, they are your facilities, they are your suppliers, your subcontractors. You have your processes, your way of doing whatever it is that you do. And then you have your profit formula. Your model of actually, how do you make money? All of those are interlinked and they link to your value proposition. So why is it that your customer wants what it is that you do? What your product, your service, why do they want it for you? Why do they want to part with their hard-earned cash and give it to you? Now, all of that is absolutely interlinked, and we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that through the presentation in the next sort of 30 minutes. So within Lean, within the absolute foundations, we've got this concept of what adds value to what we do that our customer wants, and then the opposite of that is actually what doesn't add value. And it's harsh, but then it's waste. If you're doing something, if you have an activity within your organization that doesn't add value that your customer wants, that's, to be harsh, it's waste. And you've got these 3 categories, and this is a bit black and white, but some things are purely adding value. Some things are necessary, but they don't actually add the value. But they're important steps along the way. This is where the opportunity for process improvement is. Other things are, in the eyes of the customer, they are pure waste. And these are the opportunity to eliminate some things along the way. So we've now got our second poll. So this has been measured by men in white coats across the Western world. So what percentage of what happens in your business does your customer value, and more importantly, they will be happy to pay for? So we do a quick poll on that. And one way to think about this is, if you were to list everything that happens within your organization that's required to get the job done, and you were to list that on an invoice and you send it to your customer, actually, how much of it would they say, yeah, I'll pay for that, I'll pay for that? Oh no, I'm not paying for that. And we'll see what you think now. Right, interesting. So between you believe that 60% of what happens within your business, your customer values and would be willing to pay for. I'm afraid the numbers are far harsher than that. And this has been measured literally across the Western world in all types of organisation. The answer is 5%. It's a scary low number. And in fact, some large service organisations, it would be less than that. So 95, as I say, scary number, 95% of everything that happens within your organisation does not truly add value to the product, the service that your customer is willing to pay for. Now, when I say everything, I mean to run the organisation, to top up the website, to clean the windows, well, it's everything. So that gives us this concept of value and waste. So we'll start off with the classic Toyota definition, and then we'll take that back to actually what does that mean for us in the real world. So if you were to Google the Toyota 7 wastes, you get something like 25 million Google results. So this has been written about 25 million times the world over. And to remember them, they spell out tin wood. So we have transport. So it's necessary to get your products, your services, for where they are to you. It's necessary to, if it's a physical product, to ship them to your customer. Doesn't actually add value. Okay, your customer is willing to pay for some postage. Inventory, if you're holding stock, depending on what your business model is. Motion within your business. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you glue yourself to the spot, but if you were to do a spaghetti diagram of how you were to move around your office, my office is slightly smaller than the team office that I'm used to sharing, but motion, we have to move. It's good for us, but it doesn't actually add the value if you start following yourself around the office and to do a spaghetti diagram. Waiting for answers, waiting for confirmation, waiting for deliveries, waiting for decisions, waiting for that app to be developed. It's all waiting. Now, overproduction is an interesting one, and trying to translate that to what you do. So it's about doing more than is required at this moment in time. Kind of links in with the just in time. But also, if you're overproducing a thing, then that then links to inventory. You can apply that to some of the virtual stuff as well. Over processing, think about this as a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Think about this in terms of minimal viable product that your customer is willing to pay for. So it's about having a process that's appropriate to the way that you do things. If you're recording on paper and transferring to Excel and copying it into another spreadsheet, you're probably over processing some of your data a little bit, and there will be a better way of doing it. The D for defects, not necessarily entirely wrong, but not right first time. So how many times are you having to just sort of finish off the product or just fettle the data or tweak the output from whatever it might be? Those are the classic Toyota 7 ways. We then got the S added on at the end, skills, not adding or not utilising the knowledge that the people have within your organisation. It's unutilised resource. So those are the classic 7. The challenge then is, okay, so how do they apply to us in the real world? So we've then got, from John Bashino, we've got the 14 office wastes. Apologies for, we've got the 14 office wastes. I better make sure my other phone is off as well. That was quite timely. So we have got, I'm not going to go through all of them, but of the 14, I'm sure you can relate to many of them. I will just highlight 5 of those, and 3 of those in particular we'll delve into a little bit more. So sorting and searching. So looking for your documents, looking for your files, whether they're on the G drive, whether they're in Teams, whether they're in the cloud, whether it's products or services that are in the warehouse that we last went to a while ago, whatever it might be. If things aren't located in a place where you can find them and aren't in a standardized place so everyone can find them, but more importantly, when they add something else, it's added in the same place, there will be some waste around that. The next one I've highlighted is around measurement. So measurement drives behavior. So I worked with a company a while ago, and the MD there, they were making a product. The MD's message to the shop floor was, we need to make more, we need to go faster. And that was conveyed all the way to the shop floor. The behaviour that drove was, you want us to go faster? Are you sure? And they knew perfectly well things ran at 8 on the dial, and the machine was good. They turned it up to 11 as instructed, and they made more, and it went faster. And I'm sure you can imagine the result, rather than actually standing back and looking at the entire value stream. We'll come back to that in a moment. I've also highlighted inappropriate prioritising. Big difference between urgent and important. The difference between firefighting and actually planning the things that need to be done to get that project done. Interruptions, and the phone call was not planned. But we live in a world surrounded by multimedia. emails, ping notifications, team chat, whatever it might be. If we've planned to be working on something and we get interrupted, even if it was just, oh, who was that on the phone? And I'll phone them back later. Or something goes ping. It takes us 3 minutes to get back to whatever it was we were concentrating on. The danger there is if we were doing something that was actually multitask, we'll get, oh, did I finish that one? I think I did, and we're on to the next one. Actually, you've skipped it. There's a good reason why on a hospital ward, the person doing the drugs round, administering the important dose, they have a red tabard, and it basically says, do not disturb unless the building is on fire. Because if they're disturbed while they're working out your dose, then bad things happen. Next thing I've highlighted is mistakes, errors, lack of knowledge. So I think that comes from Deming. Most problems lie in the system, not the person. There's a Japanese phrase, which is something like, if the student hasn't learned, then the teacher hasn't taught. So their first assumption would be, actually, if someone isn't doing the job right, then actually, have they been taught correctly? Let's check the training records. Are the work instructions correct? Actually, is the process clear? And that then links us back to, I mentioned value and value streams. So what's a value stream within your organisation? Think about it from, we get the inquiry. That inquiry flows through our organisation. Hopefully we take the we process the inquiry, we take the order, we'll do something, we'll deliver our product or service to the customer. Now that value stream could be efficient and straightforward, or it could look something like this. So that's a real one from actually the process of repeat prescriptions within a GP practice. And it's surprisingly messy once you start getting the different people within the organisations, within an organisation, to actually map out their bit of the process. Normally what happens is everyone within their area is doing their job to the best of their abilities. It's only when you link the whole thing together, you start to see the opportunity for improvement. And lean is absolutely where you can apply it to those different areas, those different opportunities. So one of the other areas I highlighted was about how things are stored, how you find things, which leads us to 5S, absolutely in the foundations of lean. 5S is a systematic approach to creating order from chaos. It's not just about tidying up. It's a place for everything in its place. So if I were to ask my daughter, now 20, to tidy up, you know, grandma's coming around, tidy up the dining room. She doesn't tidy, she clears. So she'll open the drawer in the Welsh dresser, the table is cleared, you'll never find anything again. But grandma walks in and it's spotless. You know, there's, you know, everything is away. So the difference here, 5S stands for sort. So actually sort what you've got. Set, a place for everything in its place. Shine, so make it visual. Then standardise and importantly sustain. Those are the 5 S's. Again, Google it, you'll find millions of hits. The important thing there is a well-organised workplace. And I'm not talking about just factories. A well-organised workplace can be 20% more efficient. So throughout your day, just make note of the things that you're trying to find. And whether they're on G Drive, whether they're in Teams, are they well organised? Are people across your entire organisation storing things in the same place? If not, you need some 5S. Now, whether you listen to Chris Evans or not, I hope you've heard of Marie Kondo. Chris Evans is an absolute fan of Chris Evans is a fan of Marie Kondo, raves about her occasionally, and she has taken 5S and its Japanese origins, has written a good few books on actually the Japanese art of tidying up. So if you want some good background reading, buy one of her books. I'm not on commission. You can apply it to anything. When you get to the point of applying it to the socks drawer, that's, I think, a step too far. You can pretty much apply it to anything else. That links us into visual management. Hopefully we've got two halves to the brain. One half works kind of words, numbers. The other half is visual. The point being, not everyone can do the words and numbers quite so well. Everyone can do the visual. So the more that we can organise solutions, the more that we can organise the things around us in a way that is visually clear, our brain picks it up within half a second. So next time you walk past the fire escape and you see the green illuminations and the arrows and everything leading you safely in that direction, next time you walk around IKEA and you're trying to find the shortcut to the exit, your brain picks up the visual clues very quickly. Now on the right, we've got, this is one of the, probably the simplest, most effective 5S projects I think I've done. This was in a dispatch area, and their frustration was always people weren't nicking the scissors, the knife and the pen, they were borrowing them. So he'd find them on the shelves, the tape gun would end up in the office. So we put a box around them, we labelled them, and what do you think that looked like in 6 months? Now, the normal answer is people say, well, they still nick them. No, there was 2 pairs of scissors and 3 pens. So people felt a compulsion that when they were going past with a pen and they didn't know where to put it, that's where the pen lives. Now, if you picture your cutlery drawer, you've got your knives, your forks, your spoons, your teaspoons, place for everything in its place. Now, that combined with sorting out the area slightly, introducing some flow into how works orders were printed, how things were picked, productivity in the area went up 20%. They weren't working faster, they weren't working harder. We didn't invest on anything other than some label printing on the edge of the table. We eliminated the waste. We eliminated the non-value adding within their activities, the searching, the walking, the motion, the excess transport, and productivity went up. Eliminate the waste, improve the non-value adding, and you're left with the value adding processes in whatever it might be. So the point being, foundations, visual management is good. More is better. Well, to a point. So this is, if you're into your cryptocurrency trading, so this is a screenshot of Binance, some wonderful visual management within there to a point. I mean, I don't know how your brain is, but it takes me a moment just to work out what's going on there. All very pretty, some wonderful colours. I had a boss a while ago who, his office wall was an entire wall of graphs. He had more graphs than you could shake a stick at. So he got to the point of literally paralysis by analysis, I think is the phrase. So visual management is good, but you know, there's a common sense level. So we then get, and I realise I'm going far faster than I was planning. So I think I'm almost at the end. So we then get to the point of starting to link it all together. How do you link these elements? How do you implement it within your business into something that is doable? So as we've talked about, we've got 5S, we've got the workplace in the absolute foundations. So whatever your workplace is, whether it's a factory, whether it's an office, whether you're all working remotely, the more that you can implement 5S in your resources, there will be improvement. The more that you can standardize the things that are standardizable. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you start doing standard operating procedures and work instructions on everything that you do. You know, some things are more obvious than others, but there are some things, particularly if it's within a system, you do need a standard process. I think even with something that you do frequently, you have to do it 10 times before it starts to become clear, before it starts to become intuitive, and you don't need to pick up the work instruction. But that's 10 times within a reasonable period of time. If you've done it 10 times in 6 months, actually, you will probably always need the work instruction for that thing if there's a level of complexity. Above that, we've got our metrics, our targets, our objectives. Actually, what is it that you're striving to achieve? Now, I mentioned measurement drives behaviour. So if you have the wrong targets, you will drive the wrong behaviours. So if we target the sales team on lead generation, they will generate lots of leads because it's what they're measured on. I worked with one organisation where the sales team was incentivised. Their bonus was based on orders logged on the system by the end of the month. So the orders were logged. In the small print, it didn't say those orders had to be fully complete with all the technical detail. So what happened was the sales guys got the order, they logged it on the system, and that's it. Job done. They're off to get the next one. Now, this was an engineering company, and they made some quite big products, some of which were literally cast iron. The others were machined titanium. Now, that's quite fundamental for the manufacture, the ordering, purchasing and design of the product. But the sales guys hadn't finalised the spec. They'd got the order, they'd given the client the lead time, and they're on to the next one. And the company was late every time with their orders because it took 3 weeks to finalise the spec. So we changed the rules. The sales guys weren't allowed to log an order without a finalised spec. So we if it was France, we'd have had a strike. We then had a couple of weeks of grumbling, and then by the end of the month, the sales guys were bringing in a order with a finalised spec. So they now, the lead time was 12 weeks for the company to achieve what it needed to achieve. Another organisation I worked with was they were selling sails for boats. So what they did, or what they used to do, was the sales guy would go, he'd have a coffee and drink whatever you drink when you're going to look at a very big boat, and say, yep, we can do you a set of sails for this, and it'll be about this much. So the company then gets a tentative order. They then have to send the technical guy out to measure up the boat, which takes time. It's a delay, and sometimes with this kind of order, time is more important than the money. So that the delays weren't good. They changed the process, gave the salesperson a tape measure. They would go out and actually at the early stage, they'd measure it all up. They had a standardized sheet that they had to collect all the information on all of the boxes. And not only did they shorten the lead time because they cut out steps, but their win rate went up, and it went up significantly because now the salesperson, when they came back, they actually had all of the details. They could give a much more detailed quote far quicker, and the customer was happy. So win-win all round. So then top of the funnel is then policy deployment. So actually, what is it that your organisation is striving to achieve? And that is underpinned by what are the measures, what are the targets that your organisation has to achieve for you to achieve that goal, that policy deployment, so that you're aiming for world class in your thing, whatever it is that you do. Now, if we've got a visual workplace and an empowered workforce, we've got information coming up from the entire team through the organisation. Now, the flip side of that is going the other way, is we've got communication from the top. So it has to be clear what it is we're striving to do. It has to be clear what it is that we're achieving. So things flow both ways. So we've then got that's the high level policy deployment. We then got, okay, so how does that, how does that apply to the teams? How does that, how can we apply that at an office level? And whatever the metrics are that are appropriate to your team, and I've just picked a classic one here. So whether it's safety, quality, delivery, people, environment, what's happening within those areas, what's happened in the last month, and taking it from, if we take safety as an example, we've not just got the accidents that have happened, we've got the risk assessments that are being done, we've got the near misses, that's the opportunity for improvement, and you can apply that across all of the metrics, again, that are relevant to you within your organisation. So I won't take you through all of those. And we're now at the point of, okay, so how do we now start to bring that all together? How does it apply to you and your business model? And I'm going to go back to the beginning for a bit of the late Clayton Christensen. And again, you've got to now reflect on actually the resources that you've got within your organisation, the processes that you have to get the job done. Now, if you get a chance, on YouTube, look up Clayton Christensen, Jobs to be Done, Milkshakes. And he explains this wonderfully. And he's developed an entire management thinking around jobs to be done. And again, what is your profit formula that's linked to the value proposition for your organisation? So what are your processes? How do they link to your objectives? How do they link to your strategy? And we've then got, same question, your resources. How are they linked to your objectives? How are they linked to your strategy? What are the measures that you have in place? How does your profit formula link to your objectives and your strategy? Again, what are the measures that you have in place? And it all absolutely links together. So I think I'm slightly ahead of time, but I hope you've got some good questions, and I hope there will be some good bits within that you can apply to your organisation. Thank you very much. And I will hand over for some questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's have a little look in the question and answer thing. Right, so one to get us started. How do you get started on implementing Lean?
Right, good question. Lean is a big toolbox, or there is a big toolbox within Lean, and the challenge is, where do you start? If we go back to the Lean Temple, the House of Lean, the place to start is not going straight for just in time, straight for continual improvement. The place to start is the foundations. 5S, workplace organisation, is absolutely the starting point. It's the easiest tool to apply. It's the tool that you can apply area by area, team by team, office by office, and it will give you the quickest results with the least effort. So 5S, or workplace organisation. So place for everything in its place.
Excellent. That sounds like a good place to start, and it may help answer the next question, actually. How do I convince my leaders to practice Lean?
Oh, that's a good question. And I would reflect on actually what is it that the organisation is trying to do. So going back to the business model, so what is it that you're delivering in terms of a product or service? What are the measures that you have in place that the organisation is trying to achieve? And then consider what it takes across the team to achieve those measures. And ask yourselves how much of what you do adds value that your customer is willing to pay for, how much of it is necessary but doesn't add value, how much of it is pure waste.
This one connects to that, actually, around getting companies to recognise that they can be more lean. Ties very closely with that. How do you convince your leaders to practice more Lean? So I think you've covered that one off already.
Okay.
Next one, how does Lean apply in non-manufacturing settings? So a little bit about your office implementation, I guess, Andy.
Oh, Lean can be applied absolutely in any sector. The challenge is to pick out the tools that are appropriate. Mapping is, I'm an absolute fan of mapping. So slightly unfortunately, last February, I put in a huge stationery order for brown paper and Post-it notes. So at the moment, underneath my sofa downstairs is a pile of brown paper. On my shelf up here, I've got an absolute pile of Post-it notes now that will last me a lifetime. I now use online tools for mapping, but a good way of looking at a sort of a non-physical organisation is actually map out the process across all of the departments. So that example that I showed you, that kind of looks like spaghetti was the process of a repeat prescription going through a GP practice. So whether it arrived virtually, whether it was a piece of paper being dropped into the office, it went through the reception team, the admin team, the script team, going on to probably a quick oversight by the nurse practitioners before it then went to the GPs. And then again, it either goes out by paper to the pharmacy or it goes electronically. So even if the processes are electronic, you can map it. You can map what happens between your teams.
Lovely. I'd imagine if you take one of those spaghetti process charts, map it and then simplify it, you spark joy. Coming back to Marie Kondo.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But the steps would be map what you've got, understand where the pain is, and then quantify that with some data. So coming back to measurement, link that to some data.
Lovely. And that comes to another question here. What are the most common mistakes in implementing Lean?
I think probably trying to rush, having a go and thinking of it as a one-off event rather than continual improvement, and failing to use data. So actually that reminds me of when I was a team leader on a shop floor a long time ago. So we improved one of our manufacturing cells, and not that I'm biased, but we made it really good and it looked fantastic and we made it better. One of our directors wandered past and I grabbed it, Steve, look at what we've done. We've made it better. And I don't know if I caught him on a bad day, but he said, okay, why? What do you mean? Why have you made this cell better? Okay, it looks great, but it's now there. Where was it before? Why didn't you do that cell? The point being, we hadn't started with data. We'd done the cell because we thought we'd do that cell, rather than actually collecting some simple data. Now data doesn't need to be a statistical analysis. It can be a simple tally chart of how often has something happened within the last week, how often does it happen in the month. Use that simple data so that you've got a before. Now, it might be that little manufacturing cell was absolutely the right thing to have improved. The point being, we didn't have the data to show what it was like before, so that when we made it better, we couldn't demonstrate by how much. So start with data. Look up Deming, plan, do, check, act. So form a plan, collect some data, use that data to guide you to where you start and to convince others that it's the right thing to be doing. Quite often there's a lot of emotion, a lot of opinions around what's broken and what needs fixing. Clarify those opinions with the data and then get going.
Right, just one for the audience for a minute. If you have any more questions, please do pop them in the Q&A, because I've only got one more for Andrew. So when we've done that, we'll move on from the Q&A. So if any last questions, do just put them in. The last question that's in there ties with what you've just been saying, I think. How can we link our targets with what we tackle? Now, obviously, you've just talked about data in terms of doing that, but in terms of targets and where you want to actually get to rather than from your starting point. So how do we link our targets with what we tackle? Okay,
going back to policy deployment, it's important to consider from the head of the organisation, what is it that we are trying to achieve? What does success look like? And therefore, at the end of the day, when we've achieved this thing, what's the number we've hit? Now, just by hitting it, what are the behaviours that we want to drive within the organisation? And we need to be careful about what we measure and what behaviours that then drives. So it might be that objectives need to be set in terms of a target of something that ultimately delivers the end product. But there are some stepping stones on the way. So it's important to link your targets with what you're trying to achieve and the behaviour that then drives. I hope that makes sense, but making sure that we're driving a lean behaviour, one of improvement, rather than just driving activity of we've got to create leads because the target is to have leads, rather than actually the target is the output rather than necessarily the input.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think on that point, that's a perfect place. Oh, hang on. I always say that's a perfect place to finish, and then a question does come in. Obviously, you can measure productivity in terms of cost/profit. However, how do you really measure happiness, and how do you measure it in the same hard data you'd measure success?
Oh, that's a good question. Happiness, that's a really hard one to answer. Now, some of the healthcare stuff that I've done before, one of my former colleagues was a clinical psychologist, and I've forgotten the right name for the scale, but there is a happiness scale, and the way that she suggested you would measure it is through a staff survey, and you'll have seen the smiley faces. So, rate yourself on how happy you feel today around this measure. What do you think of the coffee today on this scale? So it's more of a subjective in terms of how much of a smiley face you would give it, rather than, actually it's 87%.
Lovely. Isn't it somewhere like Bhutan that does a gross domestic happiness index instead of the normal economic ones? Or maybe I'm making that up.
I've not heard of that one before. It could well be, but there is a proper name for this, the happiness scale. So I'm afraid you'll have to Google that one, because I can't remember. But there is a tool for measuring happiness. Well,
hopefully this webinar's created a little bit of happiness, and like I said earlier, sparked a little bit of joy. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you, Andrew, for your presentation today. That was really helpful. I did promise to everybody else at the beginning that I would tell them a little bit about how to get in touch with Innovate UK EDGE. So as mentioned in the welcome, as a participant of this webinar today, you have the opportunity to access a range of comprehensive business support services tailored to your business need. If you'd like to discuss your business need further, please do contact the Innovate UK EDGE team. The details are currently on screen for you. And a little bit about next week. Next Tuesday morning at the same time, we're moving on to the next webinar in our series, which is around leadership, bringing out the best in yourself and your organisation. That will be with our business psychologists, Carolyn Gawley and Anne-Marie Rowson. You can sign up to that following the website on the screen at the moment, or by scanning the code with your mobile. Places will be in demand as always for our webinars. Thank you all for attending today. There'll be a short survey in a moment. Your feedback is very important to us, so please, if you can, just spend 60 seconds filling it in. And with that, we look forward to seeing you next time at Innovate 2021. Thank you.